good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the True Family. Today we're having a special guest with us, Jean Piaget. Born on August 9, 1896, was a Swiss psychologist. He is famous for his work with children and how they learn. He placed great importance on the education of children. As the director of the International Bureau of Education, he declared in 1934 that only education is capable of saving our societies from possible collapse, whether violent or gradual. His theory of child development is student in pre-service education programs. Educators continue to use his ideas. He is none other than G. Thank you so much for being here with us. It's a privilege having you.
Thank you so much for having me here.
This is a disclaimer. This is a product for school purposes. However, the information is factual and can be very useful. Thank you. What is the cognitive psychology about?
Well, you know, the cognitive psychology is, well, basically the scientific study of the mind um, as an information processor. And it basically deals with the things that go on in the minds of individuals. So these things could include your perception, um, the attention, the your memory as well, also your thoughts, your thinking, and your language, and even consciousness.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Fair enough. All right. So, how did your interest in cognitive development come about?
Well, that is a very good question. You know, you see, before I became a psychologist, I learned, I was really trained in the natural sciences and also epistemology. And basically, I was a biologist, right? I was a biologist and I studied a branch of philosophy, which priorly I, I stated called epistemology, which was basically the study of knowledge. So I became very fascinated in the whole thing about knowledge.
Ah, interesting. That's good. So, why did you become more interested in psychology, though?
So I became more interested in the field of psychology as I listened to children speak, and I even listened to my own children. I became very interested in how their thoughts were and how they put their ideas into to formulate whatever they thought, and it was very interesting for me. So that's why I decided to go into the field of psychology,
Hmm. Children can be very interesting.
which is very true. That's
Yes,
so true.
yes,
Yeah.
it's true, it's true. You mentioned that your observation of children caused you to become more interested in psychology. Were you able to develop a cognitive theory on children?
Oh yes, absolutely. By observing and using what is it again? By observing and using a standard set of questions
Okay.
as a starting point for children.
Mhm.
You know, I was able to follow a child's chain of thought, what the things that they thought and how they decided to acknowledge certain things around them. And to be honest, you know, when I questioned them, I did not really, I wasn't really looking for a right answer or a wrong answer. But instead, you know, I was looking for how they reasoned and the forms of reasoning that they used while I asked them questions. See, I was even hired by Theodore Simon, to standardize psychometric measurements, you know, and this was used for French students way back in the 1919, and it was quite impressive, you know. And psychometric measures, they were done to evaluate the educational and psychological levels of these children, to understand where each of them were. Because we know that students, we know that learners are very different and they're from different backgrounds. So it is very important for us to see the linkage between their intellectual level and their psychological level as well. And so many years after monitoring these students, I came to the conclusion, you know, that um, intellectual development is due to the interaction of hereditary or environmental factors. Yes. And another key principle about this theory was that knowledge is invented and reinvented as a child goes through their different stages. Yes.
Interesting. I love what I am hearing. Okay. Based on some brief research, I saw that you have four stages of intellectual development. Can you briefly describe to us what each is about?
You know, I know that this is a very dear work.
Mhm.
You know, this is a very interesting craft that, you know, I came up with, and you know, so the intellectual development can also be called cognitive development. And from observation, I discovered that children think and reason differently.
Mindset is so interesting.
Exactly. And everyone has passed through an invariant sequence of four distinct stages. And so, in the word invariant means that a person cannot skip stages or reorder them. It means that it is just a forward movement. You know, the development is just, it's a forward movement. You cannot go back. You cannot miss a step as well in that theory. And yes, and not because every normal child goes through the same order means that there won't be some variety in the ages at which children attain each stage. So basically, what that means is that a child will go through stages, but sometimes they might be at different ages. So it's not that they won't go through the same stages, but the different stages might occur at different ages within child. Yes. So the the first stage is called the sensory motor stage, and this is from birth to 2 years of age. And infants learn about the world through their senses, through their senses, and through their actions. So they just based on their environment, they learn and grow and interpret even in their little minds. And so in this stage, the cognitive abilities that are formed are one of them is object permanence. And this is basically, for example, parents and relatives play the game peekaboo, right? I'm sure that everybody
I do that too with my child.
exactly, and there is a fun game.
It is.
So this game helps children to understand that an object still exists even though it is hidden.
Ah.
Yes, so this is a cognitive development to help children to understand that even though, let's say we have a teddy bear, right? And you have the teddy bear on the bed with your child, and you just suddenly move the teddy bear. And at that moment, the child may think, where has the teddy bear gone? But this stage is just developing them to understand that the teddy bear isn't really gone, but it's still there, it still exists, right? Yes. And also, other abilities that are developed are self-recognition, which is very key for any individual, and deferred deferred imitation as well, and representational play. Yes. So that's the first step. That's the first stage in this theory. Next, we have the pre-operational stage. And so this is ranging from ages 2 to 7 years. And here, toddlers and young children, they have the ability to represent the world through language and imagery. Yes. And so children think about things symbolically. Yes, in a symbolical way. And this causes them to make one thing stand for something else other than itself. Yes. And infants demonstrate animism in this level, which is basically where a child thinks that non-living objects have life and has feelings like a person. So they might see even the same teddy bear and on a chair, and they just feel as if, you might hurt the teddy bear. You don't want to drop the teddy bear, or else it may feel pain. So they're just associating what they see because most yeah, exactly. Yes.
I understand.
So, and also another thing is that thinking is based on subjective judgments about situations and ecocentric. So ecocentric is basically where the child sees the world in their own perspective, and they expect you and everyone else around them to see the answer,
had that
but
experience.
you know, it's just
Yes,
yes,
it's just cute.
and it is not it's not all the time. It isn't beneficial all the time because it can affect
Yes,
others
yes,
in a negative
yes,
light.
it's true.
Yes,
It's true.
yes.
Mhm.
So here children think logically and more successfully
Mm.
if they can manipulate real materials or pictures of them.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thirdly
Okay.
is the concrete operational stage.
Yeah.
And this lasts from ages 7 to 11.
Okay.
Hmm. At this stage, children begin to think logically. Yes, they begin to think logically about concrete events. And they become less egocentric and begin to think about other person's feelings. So they drop the perspective of the world, of how they see the world and how they expect others to see the world. And they begin to take into consideration how others may feel.
Ah.
Yes.
Also, prior to this level of expectation, they would want you to think through their minds, see through
Yes.
their eyes.
Yes.
But I'm moving out of this stage now, going between 7 to 11.
Yes.
Now they're actually adapting to how they're giving a chance to your way of thinking and your way of
Your feelings.
yes.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yes.
good.
Yes.
And you're saying that they will definitely be focusing on concrete events such as Christmas.
Yes.
It will be a
Yes.
season they'll be looking forward to,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
summer break from school
Exactly.
and these sort of stuff.
Which
That's
is true, yes.
okay. Okay, traditions that we really do support.
Exactly. And the concrete stage, I believe, is a major turning point in a child's cognitive development, as it marks the beginning of logical or operational thought. Yes. So it's very important that you see this in your child. It shows that you know it shows that your child is developing logically because for the ages to come, you're going to need logical thinking and, aspects of problem solving, and so on. Yes. So this means that the child can work things out mentally and children understand the concept of conservation. So this concept basically deals with where children understand that something stays the same in quantity, even though the appearance may change. So even though, for instance, you have a Play-Doh, right? And you break it in half. You have one rolled up and you have one that is flat. But at this stage, well, in the earlier stages, they would think that the one that is flat is more than the one that is rolled up.
Ah.
But in this stage of the commencement of logical reasoning, they will understand that it is the same quantity. So it wouldn't make any difference for them to choose as to which one is larger in size or smaller in size.
Back in the days, what they would have done is they would have given us a $5 coin. Well, you have a $5 coin. Someone that is older than you would give you $2 and tell you, you take this two money and I'm going to take your one money. that would be
Yes.
something.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so basically what I'm also gathering from what you just said is that they will no longer just leave the tap running because they are now cognitive of the fact that water is wasting. So they'll now turn off the tap as soon as they're through washing their hands
Yes.
and stuff like that. Okay. I'm
Okay.
learning.
Yes. So now we're at the final
Yes.
stage of the cognitive development. And this stage is the formal operational stage. And this is from ages 12 to over 12. So this would
Okay.
involve the adolescents
Ah,
as well. And the concrete operations are carried out. They are carried out whereas, oh, so the concrete operations are carried out on on things. So that the concrete operation was the operation that I was talking about earlier, right before this one,
okay.
the one between seven and
Right.
11. Yes.
Right.
So this one, that one, sorry, that one was on things, but this one, the formal operational stage, are this one is carried out on ideas.
Ah,
So it's more mental
yes.
than concrete.
Yeah.
Yes. So adolescents can deal with abstract ideas. For example, they no longer need to think about sharing of cakes or, muffins or fruits to think about division or fractions because it's more mental. And from 12 years, children can follow the form of logical argument without reference to its content. Yes. And people develop the ability to think about abstract concepts and logically test hypotheses. Yes. So this stage is more mental. They're more focused on ideas rather than the actual physical thing in their hand. Yes. Yes.
These are really four interesting points.
Yes, they are. They
And
are.
I'm happy they're developed. Alright, so I just have two more questions to ask and I'll close.
Yes.
So, Mr. PJ, how has your theory impacted education?
I believe that it has greatly impacted education, and it still impacts education today. My theory has impacted education on as an association advocates for the use of learning centers in classrooms. And from my theory, they have seen that learning centers will allow children to learn by interacting with their environment. And learning areas are set up on or in the classroom, rather, so that children may go to one learning area and they can learn something from there by using the items that are there on display. That would be like, for instance, let's say they're learning about math. They can use the abacus
Right?
and
Geometry set.
yes, and learn how to count. Whereas they can go to another learning area in the classroom, maybe learn about science, the
Yeah.
leaf or so on. Yes. So this is where the children are going into different environments, and this is where they are building their own learning as they are experiencing new things. They are more involved there. So they're teaching themselves, and because you might have a little chart here and there, so they can read and understand. So it's
They're
the
becoming creators themselves.
exactly, exactly. So from children's errors here, teachers can obtain insights and they can get the perspective of the child.
Mhm.
And from these errors, they're able to guide them and help them where they see them falling. in education as well. And now children are being taken on field trips to learn more about the world. So they're being brought into different environments. You know, it's more practical, it's more tactile, it's more hands on for these children so that they can understand and see the world and experience it in a different way, in a first hand way. Yes, so that's what I believe this theory has, and it's still impacting on the world today.
Very good. So my final question to you is, what would you say to encourage teachers and learners during this time of uncertainty, where the learning environment is really affected?
Well, I just want to say to the teachers that they are not to give up
Mhm.
in this hard time, not to feel discouraged in any way,
Mhm.
but just to explore and become more creative in their guidance to the children and to the fellow learners out there. You know, stay focused. And just as how you learned by exploring your physical world and having physical interactions, so should you learn by exploring your virtual world and virtual interactions. I'm sure it must be different, but learning to adapt to changes
Mhm.
is very important in one's life. I strongly believe in that.
That's so true.
Yes, yes,
It's so true. And people tend to have a tendency to reject change. And I think mostly it's because of their fear of not knowing what is to come. So they're fearful of the change that is going to take place. So
which is true. Which is
hence
very
when,
true.
yes, hence when a change is coming, it's best to avoid ambiguity by providing as much information as possible about that new thing that's coming. Because you see, when people are sensitized about something, they're less likely to be afraid of it. So, probably we want to sensitize people about
Yes,
it.
yes.
But it's really, really a pleasure having you here, sir.
It is my pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much.
Absolute. I take it as an honor to be here.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Right. So, guys, there you have it. Mr. PJ has spoken. And if you would like to hear more of this vital information, feel free to comment down below. Thank you so much for staying with us. And do have yourself a wonderful rest of the evening.